Hey, Robyn Openshaw here. I am the Green Smoothie Girl online and also this new channel, Robyn Openshaw Bitcoin. I'm sharing with you bite-sized reasons why to consider Bitcoin as the pristine store of value, the most intriguing investment of our lifetimes, the way to get ahead when the stock market is super volatile. I want to talk a little bit about the tariffs today. And when real estate is poised to tank, when only 16% of Americans can even afford to buy real estate these days. So, what to do with your store value, especially if you're Gen X like me and you're looking at retirement and you're maybe more interested in keeping what you've already got than you are in growing your money, but also as a way to grow your money and just a different way of thinking about money. So let's talk about Bitcoin. We've just seen the biggest volatility in Bitcoin since probably 2020 when the stock market tanked and Bitcoin followed. Usually they do track together. Most of us think that eventually Bitcoin will stop tracking so much to the changes in values of the S&P 500, but the S&P 500 fell by I don't know what percent, but it really tanked on a Thursday, Friday, and a Monday morning. Well, Bitcoin did follow this time, but instead of losing 70% of its value like it did in 2020, it lost only about, I think, 10%, and then it came right back within a matter of days. So within a week, we had seen it come down and come all the way back up. Bitcoin is much more a mainstream investment than it was in 2020. People didn't understand it then. I'm going to mention to you a few things about my own investment strategy, not as financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor, but just how much I've pivoted my own assets as I had a very different off ramp for retirement 5 years ago than I do now. So let me put a chart up that shows you the M2 money supply. And you'll see the line for the M2 money supply running all the way to current, whereas the Bitcoin price, you can see how closely it tracks to M2 money supply. And if you don't know what the M2 monetary supply is, it's basically all the liquidity in the world. So this is showing you the global liquidity pool, which is basically there's more money out there. When there's more money out there, and that could be from all of people's savings accounts and their money market accounts, money that you can quickly access. It also very closely tracks to especially the US Federal Reserve printing money or doing what they call quantitative easing. They only started actually talking about quantitative easing and quantitative tightening as strategies maybe 15, 18 years ago. But they were doing it before then. And some hedge fund managers figured out that when they start printing money, the stock market goes up. Well, Bitcoin also goes up. So as you can see here, it lags by about 12 weeks. And so we expect, based on the increase in money supply, which is highly correlated to the Federal Reserve, pulling off of a couple of years now of quantitative tightening strategies, including high interest rates, to more quantitative easing, there's more liquidity out there, and we expect that we're about to see Bitcoin go on a bull run. So one way you could see Bitcoin having come down in price is Bitcoin's on sale. It's a great time to get involved. And I always want to remind you, I literally intend to say this in every video that I do, that Americans don't understand what a big deal it is that nobody can print more Bitcoin. It must be mined via proof of work. There's actual work involved in mining for Bitcoin, just like there is mining for gold, only instead of pickaxes and shovels, you're using digital tools. But nobody can print more Bitcoin. Now, with institutions custodying Bitcoin, we are all keeping a very close eye on them and wanting to make sure that they don't hypothecate Bitcoin or start issuing paper ownership of Bitcoin where it doesn't track one-to-one with the underlying asset that they hold. So there's people out there who are sort of riffing that maybe Coinbase is doing this because they own, I think, 250,000 shares of Bitcoin or something like that, or they hold it for various companies. Actually, I think I got that number totally wrong. But there's only 21 million total that can ever be issued. So it's a huge percentage of the Bitcoin out there is held on Coinbase, which is an exchange. And people hold their Bitcoin on Coinbase because they aren't exactly sure what else to do with it. And it's starting to seem like an institution that is like too big to fail, maybe getting to be the size of one of the banks that we consider too big to fail. So we assume that if there's some kind of market crash, that Coinbase will get bailed out. And also, I think people are afraid to self-custody their Bitcoin. And so my next video is going to be about what your options are in custodying your Bitcoin, because you can choose to self-custody it, which is going to be you securing that asset. Nobody can hypothecate it. Nobody can print more of it, thereby devaluing your own Bitcoin. You hold it very much like if you possess your physical ounces of gold versus buying shares in a gold mine or having shares of gold in the many, many different ways that there are to have paper gold. We'll just call it paper gold, but the different ways there are to hypothecate gold, I don't think anybody exactly knows, but I've read estimates of that there may be as much as 800 times more paper gold than there actually is underlying gold in the world. So that can just continue on for a long time, and it has, until everybody wants to cash in their gold at the same time, in which case we're in for a nasty surprise and we find out that they've been hypothecating gold for decades, which they have. So I also really like Bitcoin for the fact that currently it is the only truly free market in the world. Okay, we talk about free markets like they're a thing. They don't actually exist. And that brings us to Trump's tariffs. He is basically saying, I'm tired of the US being taken advantage of. I'm tired of other countries abusing us. They charge us tariffs. That's why when you go to Europe, you never see a Chevy or a GM car driving around, whereas here in the US, you see plenty of Audis and Mercedes, do you not? So we are, as the federal government, the Trump administration, they're trying to level the playing field. Now, some critics will say that Trump is trying to change the playing field so it's not level, and it's other countries who have to run uphill on the soccer field instead of always the US. But other people, of course, who know that Trump's negotiating style is the art of the deal, always asking for way, way more than you actually expect to land on. That's probably what's going on here. That's been predicted out there. We're already seeing it with lots of countries coming to the US. Trump claims it's 75 of them saying we're ready to deal. Haven't fact checked this, but apparently China in the last 24 hours has finally come forward and said we're ready to deal as well. And so Trump pulled off of all the individual deals that he had. They weren't really deals, they were ultimatums, they were demands of every country. I think what he did was very clever. He made a different deal for every single country, what sanctions, what tariffs, how much, so that they couldn't all come together in a big block, blocks being like NATO or NAFTA, and kind of link arms against the US. So they couldn't do that because they all had different tariffs, they all had different demands. And a lot of people were thinking that China was going to be able to ally all these other countries in the world, and that is not what happened. Apparently, most of the countries in the world have stepped forward and said, we want a deal. We want lower tariffs. We are willing to play fair. And so we may see an onshoring of jobs here in America. But I also think it's really good for Bitcoin. Everything that's happening that's pro-USA and righting the wrongs of the past is also really pro-Bitcoin. China has had a really checkered past with how it engages with Bitcoin. It tried to ban it. That really didn't work out too well because Bitcoin is so decentralized with nodes all over the world that what ended up happening is just that a whole bunch of capital left China and mostly came to the US. So even though the Biden administration really wasn't friendly to Bitcoin, It's still exploded in value. It has increased an average of about 55 to 60% a year if you spread it over the last 15 years. So Bitcoin has gone up and up and up. We expect it will go up even more in the future because it's starting to see mass adoption. We're starting to see that Overton window of where it's this fringy thing and it comes closer and closer to mainstream. Okay, so this would be the Overton window that everybody's looking through, where CNN is talking about it. CNN will talk about the price of gold and Bitcoin now. Never would have happened 5 years ago. So with all the stuff that's going on with tariffs, nobody can really predict what's going to happen. I don't think that even our Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent or Donald Trump himself know exactly what's going to happen. It is the most ballsy thing we've ever seen a US president do. It is very foreign to us to see deal making of the New York City style in the White House. We just haven't had somebody with the kind of background that Trump does out there making deals that are going to completely disrupt the global order of the last 40 years. So I think it's positive for the dollar. I think it's positive for American jobs. Okay, 2 out of 3 Americans didn't go to college. We need our blue collar, we need our working class jobs. There's a lot of despair, a lot of falling into poverty in the working class in America as we offshored jobs, manufacturing, mining. Nobody's really talking about how dirty manufacturing and mining are. Hopefully, technology makes that cleaner than it was. I actually worked for a steel plant. My first professional job out of college, I did PR for a steel plant, and I was out in the community trying to convince people not to shut the steel mill down because America needs steel. We need it for bridges. There's no skyscrapers even possible without steel. We need it for our own national defense. Anyway, the community wasn't having any of it. That steel mill doesn't exist anymore. There were other problems besides that it was such a dirty, just built in World War II steel mill. But we do need those industries back in America. And I hope that we can borrow from the technologies that have evolved, because China then took on the mining and manufacturing, China and other countries, especially Southeast Asia. And their people didn't like the dirty air and all the things that came with these so-called dirty industries either. So hopefully we'll be able to use the best technology to have it be a lot cleaner. But my financial advisor does not approve of Bitcoin. If I'm telling the honest truth, I have 10 times more money invested in Bitcoin than I do with my wealth advisor, but he hasn't done the work yet to figure out. He's a libertarian. He has a very defensive position. He thinks that markets are going to tank, especially real estate, but also the stock market. And so my bookkeeper's always telling me that his Fidelity accounts are doing better than my very defensively positioned wealth advisor. And I say, yeah, I know that, but I am way more concerned about him not losing my money or keeping ahead of inflation than I am maximum returns in Fidelity accounts. So he hasn't taken the time to figure out how libertarian Bitcoin really is. And I think more and more wealth advisors are going to be getting involved and are going because it monetizes for them. There's 11 major financial institutions who got approved a year ago to custody Bitcoin or to have Bitcoin ETFs. So that's going to be how most institutions, especially, are going to invest in Bitcoin, which is to say that they're going to buy shares in an ETF or an electronically traded fund rather than dealing with the actual custodying of Bitcoin. So my next video is going to be about what your options are in custodying your Bitcoin. Are you going to hold it yourself and you trust you the most, or are you going to have an institution hold it for you? And I'm going to go through the pros and cons of both. So watch for my next video. Please subscribe to this channel so that when my next video comes out, you know about it, and so that the algorithm favors it in YouTube. And I'll see you next time.